We have two big breaking news stories on the health front this hour. NBC News reporting every employee at Health and Human Services, that's 80,000 people, getting an email offering them a buyout to quit their jobs. Also, the CDC announcing the agency will investigate potential links between vaccines and autism. So joining me right now, we have NBC News health and medical news reporter Erica Edwards. First up, let's go to what we know about this buy offer. What have you heard?
Yeah, so the HHS employees last night got this email, an unsigned email, offering them to basically walk away from their jobs for a lump sum of $25,000. Now, I can tell you that from folks I've talked with folks within HHS and with other, scientists at other federal agencies like the National Institutes of Health, they say that offers like this are, quite frankly, insulting. And they're also wary that they would ever even see a penny of that money. They have until next Friday to respond to this email. However, I can also tell you that a lot of doctors and scientists that I've talked with at the federal level have already been looking for other jobs. They are just not convinced that their job is even going to be there in the coming years.
Hey, so what's the government expecting here? All 80,000 are getting this letter. And by the way, why not signed? Is there any chance this was a mistake? It seems extraordinary that the entire department is getting this letter.
Boy, I wish I knew who sent the letter. We've seen the government sort of flip-flop on some of these offers. So who knows? Was it a mistake? Was it a mistake? They can always sort of go back and rescind that offer. And I think that's what really leaves the employees unsettled. Who is sending this letter? Exactly.
Congresswoman, it's good to see you. As I said, we're less than a week away from that government shutdown deadline. What are the Democrats going to do?
Listen, the Democrats are united as it relates to the American people. I want to be clear that this really is not partisan. I know that it looks very partisan, but at the end of the day, we know that the cuts that the Republicans are proposing, that these cuts are not only going to impact Democrats and independents, but Republicans as well. In fact, we know that the Republicans have decided that they don't want to answer to their constituents. They put out official guidance saying, do not go home and do town halls. And so right now, the Democrats are carrying the load for not only our constituency, but for theirs too, because clearly they don't have the answers for their constituents, which the honest to goodness truth is that they don't answer to their constituents. They only have decided that they're going to answer to Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
So this week, we saw the great Congressman Al Green stand up during Trump's joint address to Congress. And he ended up being censured by not only your Republican colleagues, but also 10 of your fellow Democrats. I got to ask, what was there to gain from Democrats siding with Republicans on this issue?
I have no idea. You did not see my photo there. So you know that I absolutely stood with the amazing Texan that I currently serve with. Listen, here's the reality for me. I don't think that really anyone should have decided that they should supplant their own judgment on an 80-year-old black man, especially as we are coming up on, or actually even today, the celebration of Bloody Sunday, or the commemoration, I should say, of Bloody Sunday. It wasn't a celebration for sure. And, this is someone who lived through the civil rights era and saw the dogs and saw the hoses and saw the police bludgeon and bloody people. And so he understands history in a little bit of a different way than probably anybody else or most other people sitting in that chamber. And so to decide that we were going to cast judgment on what he was feeling as the president decided to get up there and lie, as we know he always does, and say that he had a mandate. We know that he did not run on this idea of cutting out Medicaid or cutting Social Security. In fact, every time we said it, the Republicans said that we were lying. Every time we said that they were looking to Project 2025, they said we were lying. And now we know that the liar in chief did exactly what he's always done, which is lied. And for whatever reason, the American people did not trust us when we told them exactly what was going to happen. So, I voted, obviously, not to do this to Al Green, not to mention, as we sat there, one of the things that no one is talking about is that Marjorie Taylor Greene was not, she was violating House rules as well. We are not allowed to wear any hats whatsoever, no matter what. Yet she sat there on that same day and she was wearing a hat. She was wearing a MAGA hat, and that was out of decorum. And no one said anything to her.
Well, the hypocrisy abounds. We know that not only Marjorie Taylor Greene, but also Lauren Boebert used to routinely shout out at President Biden during the State of the Union addresses, and they never faced a censure from not only the Democrats, but from their own party. Let's switch gears a little bit because you have been incredibly busy in Washington this week. You're a part of the House Oversight Committee. There was a hearing this week where the mayors of 4 so-called sanctuary cities were grilled. I want to play a very quick bit of something that you definitely had to share during that hearing. Take a listen.
Have any of you been made aware of any immigrant that has had 34 felony convictions that has still been able to roam around in your cities? Anyone?
No, ma'am.
I mean, Congresswoman, it's true. I just talked about the hypocrisy from the GOP. They're so quick to want to round up people on the streets. They don't really even bother to care, if they look brown or black or whatever, it's okay. But in this instance, you do have a 34 felony convicted felon that lives in the Oval Office. If they need the address, I'm happy to give it to them. But what is going on here in terms of trying to kind of exact some type of pressure and a pound of flesh out of these mayors?
Yeah, so first of all, shout out to all the mayors, and I am saying all the mayors. It was definitely interesting to listen to the mayor of New York, but nevertheless, I will say that the mayors as a whole, they really did kind of stand their ground against what they were attempting to do to them. And so I really do applaud them. They were coming up with baseless statistics on crime. And literally they brought the mayor of Boston, Mayor Wu, who is absolutely ranked as the safest large city in the country. And they were trying to lecture her on crime and immigrants. It was absolutely insane. And so that was why I brought out the hypocrisy, and to keep them from trying to come after me and say, oh, I'm engaging in personalities by talking about Trump, I did not mention his name. So I decided that I would work through or around the rules and make sure that I laid out that as they are so outraged by these immigrants and the crime that they're bringing, and not to mention city law enforcement, local law enforcement, they are always going after crime. And they don't say, oh, you committed a murder? Oh, but you're an immigrant? Well, let me let you go, right? So they are always focused on crime. They continue to say things like the illegals and that they broke the law coming in. But what they're not telling the American people is that it is a civil violation. It is not a criminal violation to enter the country illegally. It's not a criminal. It's a crime. It's not a crime, which is why they're so frustrated, because they really want our local law enforcement to go out and round up people when they could be looking out for the murderers and the sexual abusers as well as the robbers. They want them to go and round people up on civil accusations. And so that's why I wanted to point out, don't give me this fake outrage about criminals roaming our streets when you guys stand 10 toes down for the biggest criminal that we have ever seen go into the White House.
You know, I got less than a minute, and Congresswoman, you always have a message and a strong one that you deliver. I got lots of people asking, what should we be doing? What should people be doing to be able to manage this kind of flooding of the zone by the Republicans through Trump of the confusion and the chaos? What should they be doing?
So number one, if it's something stupid like people focusing on my accent and whether or not I went to private school or not, it is a distraction. They are definitely trying to distract you. So anything that sounds stupid, just ignore that. And then pay attention to the other things. But also, we really need someone that wants to be the messenger on a daily basis who can combat the nonsense and the lies that are coming out of the Oval Office, as well as from the press secretary. But if you are sitting at home and you are frustrated and you're like, what can I do? We've got 3 special elections. If we can flip those special elections, then that means that the Democrats control the House before the midterms. So I am just begging and asking everyone to get engaged with those special elections down in Florida, and then we'll see when the one one will be announced in New York. In addition to that, it is so important that we just educate ourselves and we talk to our friends and family, because they are going to trust you before they trust somebody like me who's a politician, because as we know, so many of our politicians are liars, and as of now, a lot of them are criminals.
House Speaker Mike Johnson says he's considering removing Congressman Al Green from his committee assignments after what Republicans are calling a second disruption on the House floor this week. Congressman Green was formally censured on Thursday for standing up and protesting President Trump's address to Congress on Tuesday night. Now, a censure is symbolic more than anything. It simply means that a majority of Congress disapproved of Green's actions on Tuesday night, and that disapproval will now become a matter of public record. But during that censure vote, Green and a group of Democrats sang "We shall overcome," which forced Speaker Johnson to recess the House and skip the traditional reading of the reprimand. Now, some Republicans are pushing for all of those Democrats to be stripped of their committee assignments as well. Congressman Green knew he would face repercussions for taking a stand during the joint address, and that's not surprising. He has been fighting for civil rights for quite some time now. After his censure, the congressman tweeted this, quote, "Today, the House GOP censured me for speaking out for the American people against POTUS's plan to cut Medicaid. I accept the consequences of my actions, but I refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice. Hashtag we shall overcome," end quote. Joining me now is Congressman Al Green, Democrat of Texas. Congressman, you said in a recent interview that President Trump, quote, "uses his incivility to take advantage of our civility." Do you think your colleagues in the Democratic Party are being too civil during this time when American rights and freedoms are literally on the line?
Well, thank you for having me. I think we're at a point where we're making decisions as to how we should move forward. I believe that we have to move forward with righteous incivility. This is what we engaged in when we sang "We shall overcome," and what I engaged in when I stood and indicated that the president didn't have a mandate to cut Medicaid. Medicaid is so important to so many in my state. Texas has the highest rate of uninsured persons in the country, and it has such because it refused to expand its Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. We offered Texas $100 billion, which Texas rejected. Now, with reference to my colleagues, I have said the things that I do are of conscience. My conscience dictated that I do what I did. I am prepared to accept whatever the punishment is. I don't have to agree with it, but I can accept it because that's what peaceful protest demands. First, it demands that you get in the way. This is what John Lewis used to say, which means you're disruptive. And then you have to be prepared to suffer the consequences. I think that that would be inappropriate for the speaker to do or my colleagues, but I'm prepared to suffer the consequences. And by the way, candidly, then this is not to insult anyone. I would do it again because we have to stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves.
So, Congressman, 10 of your Democratic colleagues voted to support your censure when that was presented to the floor. What's your response to them? I recognize you don't want to be uncivil to your colleagues, but were you surprised that you didn't have the full support of the Democratic caucus?
I was neither surprised nor elated, one way or another. I did this not to get a read of what the Congress is all about. It was something that happened rather spontaneously. I was gathering my things to leave when the president said he had a mandate, and that triggered something in me. I just could not allow him to cause people to think that he may have a mandate to cut from Medicaid. The committee that has jurisdiction over Medicaid has been accorded the responsibility to cut $880 billion from that budget. It is mathematically impossible for them to do that without cutting into Medicaid. So the reading that I got from my colleagues doesn't impact me one way or another. I believe that on some issues, it is better to stand alone than not stand at all.
So you mentioned the impact of the Medicaid cuts on your constituents in the 9th District. What about the other cuts that are being undertaken by the Trump administration? How will those directly impact the people of Harris County whom you represent?
The VA hospital is in my congressional district. Many persons who work there are very much concerned. There is an air of fear, an aura of fear that has now permeated the hospital and many other places as well. People are concerned about these letters that are being sent by a person who's never been vetted, a person who has no assignment that is being announced, but who is in charge, it seems, of cutting people. And many of the people who work in the VA hospitals serve veterans, but they're veterans also. So we've got to be concerned about these persons. And I think we have to also just say this. Where's the dignity in all of what he's doing? Where's the dignity? A person who's working, you have children in school, you may have someone that you're a caregiver for, and you receive a letter indicating that you are no longer going to have the job that is so important to you and the many people who depend on you. It seems to me that there's no due process in this, but due process is one thing. Another thing is just the dignity, the humanity. How do you treat people this way when we know that people have needs? They're not billionaires. Mr. Musk has doctors and lawyers and people on assigned to take care of him. I don't know how we can say that it looks right for a billionaire to do this to everyday working people. We live in a world where it's not enough for things to be right. They must also look right.
That's a great place to leave it, Representative Green. It's not enough to do right. We have to make things look right for everyone and to do right by them. That's Democratic Representative Al Green of Texas. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Congress has less than a week to prevent a government shutdown, and House Republicans are coming face to face with the very ugly reality of what it will take to get the budget that they want. You've got the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office now saying that Republicans won't be able to meet their goal of cutting $1.5 trillion in spending over the next 10 years without significant cuts to Medicare or Medicaid benefits. Politico reports that Republicans are hoping to release text of a spending bill as early as today. Joining us now is someone that knows a little something about budgets, Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He is the ranking member of the House Budget Committee and an avid Amtrak rider, if I may add.
Congressman, it is good to see you. Simone did some of this level setting earlier about Medicaid, but I want to pull up the numbers again. You got 72.1 million Americans enrolled, 1 in 5 Americans covered overall, 80% of children in poverty, 63% of people in nursing homes, 29% of adults with mental illness. Okay, so you take that. Those are the stakes of the people in this country and then their families around them who rely on the program. Now let's look at the math. And I'm going to guess you are better at math than the Republicans who are putting together these bills, because they have available to cut outside of Medicare and Medicaid $581 billion. Their goal for cuts is $880 billion. Tell me how that maths without cutting Medicaid or Medicare.
Well, it's great to be with you. And yes, you know, when we had a 12-hour committee hearing, what we call markup on their legislation, I kept pointing out that their legislation requires hundreds of billions of dollars worth of cuts to Medicaid. They, of course, including their number two, Steve Scalise, would come back and say, oh, no, we wouldn't cut Medicaid. You can't even find the word in the bill. It was very disingenuous on their part because, as your math shows, and as I asked the Congressional Budget Office to confirm, even if you cut 100% of everything else, still, in order to reach that $880 billion total cut figure, you would have to cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid. So there is no doubt this legislation, the Republican tax cut plan, calls for the largest cuts to Medicaid in American history, all to help pay for tax cuts that mostly go to billionaires.
Congressman, in addition to the drama around the cut, no cuts of Medicare and Medicaid by Republicans, you have Speaker Johnson right now out there peddling this idea among Republicans to get on board with a stopgap bill that would largely keep the federal dollars flowing through the end of this fiscal year, which is September 30th. Some are seeing this as a little bit of a surrender by Republicans on this issue because it will keep in place the budgetary levels and priorities of the former President Joe Biden. which, of course, oh my God, Donald Trump and company must be losing their minds that we do anything that relates to Joe Biden. How do Democrats see this situation right now, going into what is a countdown clock on whether or not the government stays open? Is it in line with what some are reporting, that Democrats doubt that Trump will even abide by the next spending bill, making them even less inclined to vote for it? Or is there something else going on in that regard?
Well, I think there are a few things happening at the same time. First, let's just be clear. Republicans control the House. Republicans control the Senate. Republicans have the White House. If there ends up being a government shutdown, it will be because Republicans want a government shutdown. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I would argue we are already in a partial government shutdown, and that's because of what Elon Musk and his Doge frat bros are doing, ad hoc, agency by agency, without any warning, without any force of law behind them, just showing up with 5 U.S. Marshals, throwing people out and shutting things down, whether it's USAID, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Education Department may be next. Who knows what will be next after that? So my view is, if we're going to get back to the actual budget resolution that was last agreed to, and we're going to continue that, well, that means reversing the illegal activity that Elon Musk and his bros have been doing over the last 6 weeks. Because if you really want me to vote for something, I need to have the peace of mind and the guarantee that if I vote for a bill on Friday, all of a sudden on Saturday, Elon Musk won't show up and shut the agency down that I just agreed to fund.
I mean, well, putting that on the table, then it seems to me like there is no way that in good faith, your Republican colleagues can promise you all that, because they don't have control over Elon Musk right now at this point. I mean, the president is saying that now Elon Musk is just an advisor, but I think that that is frankly just messaging to kind of clear up the mess that he's made, as opposed to an actual policy change. So it seems to me like you all can't get the insurances that you would need to support anything that your Republican colleagues would put forward. So can we expect that Democrats are going to hold the line?
Well, I mean, I don't speak for my fellow colleagues. I respect them. They'll come to their own judgments. And we're fortunate to have a great leader in Hakeem Jeffries that I have a lot of confidence in, and I think we'll make sure that we remain unified. But as for me, any sort of agreement on any piece of legislation, I think, needs to be made with Donald Trump, because we do know that Speaker Johnson has no ability whatsoever to enforce any sort of an agreement. We saw that last December. Because the reality is,
we are raising our cups to you, Congressman. We're raising our cups. You're the first member of Congress I have heard say that.
Yeah, there's no question. Mike Johnson's speakership is one tweet from Donald Trump away from ending. That's the sad reality. So Donald Trump has all the power here on the Republican side. Any agreement we reach needs to be with him directly.
Real quick before we allow you to go, Congressman, talk to us about the post office and about Amtrak and the fact that you have Elon Musk reiterating something we have heard before, that both of those institutions ought to be privatized.
Well, it is amazing. By the way, the post office, founded by someone who would have been my constituent, Benjamin Franklin, in my congressional district is where it was founded. It has the highest approval rating of any agency within the U.S. federal government. It actually operates as quasi-independent as it is. I think that attempting to privatize the most popular part of government would indeed be deeply unpopular. And then as far as Amtrak, a subject near and dear to my heart, former President Biden and I probably talked about Amtrak more than maybe any other topic. In the Northeast Corridor, in the D.C. to New York to Boston part of our country, which is the biggest generator of our national GDP, Amtrak is absolutely vital. I cannot imagine what would happen if we lost Amtrak. I don't know how I would get to work, by the way, every week as someone who frequently is on Amtrak multiple times a week. It would have a devastating impact on our economy.
Well, right after the show, I'm going to go update Benjamin Franklin's Wikipedia page to say would-be Brendan Boyle constituent. I love that as a flex. Thank you so much, Congressman, for being with us.
President Donald Trump with a new threat to Canada, saying the U.S. may place reciprocal tariffs on Canada soon, floating a possible 250% tax on dairy products. While the Wall Street Journal reports the Justice Department is investigating what caused egg prices to rise. Joining me now, Congressman Jimmy Gomez, Democrat from California and a member of the Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, welcome back to the show. And you are also a member of the Dad's Caucus, and you've been pushing for action on the rising eggs, the grocery prices. What are your thoughts today as a new tax on Canadian dairy products, 250%, is looming?
Well, I do a lot of the shopping in my family. I go with my wife and my son, and we see the prices going up and up and up, and our savings going down and down and down. Americans are struggling when it comes to the cost of eggs, when it comes to the cost of dairy, when it comes to the cost of bread. So these tariffs are just going to make everything worse. And unfortunately, this administration, Donald Trump, Secretary Bessent, they really don't care that it's going to hurt American people, that the working class is going to hurt. I call this the let them eat cake administration, because it's made up of billionaires that are out of touch with the struggles of everyday Americans.
Okay, that's, of course, reflecting the French Revolution language. So can a DOJ investigation help reduce egg prices? And how much more can the Trump administration do if bird flu is mostly to blame?
Well, one of the things that they can start doing is really hiring back the people that were studying the bird flu, trying to develop a strategy to deal with it. And then at the same time, digging into that issue. The DOJ, fine, go ahead, investigate. But I think that's just a red herring, no pun intended, that they're trying to distract the American people, that they're actually not doing anything about egg prices. Since he got in office, egg prices have increased 33%, and it's only getting worse. And remember, he said on day one, he would lower costs for everyone, especially on groceries.
Yeah. Also new to discuss this week, the Doge drama, a clash in the Oval Office over Elon Musk's unilateral cuts. And NBC's Gabe Gutierrez posed a direct question to the president about it. And here's part of his report. Take a listen.
Some details have come out about your cabinet meeting with Elon Musk and some clashes potentially between Secretary Rubio and Secretary Duffy.
No clash. I was there. You're just a troublemaker. And you're not supposed to be asking that question because we're talking about the World Cup. Elon gets along great with Marco, and they're both doing a fantastic job.
But the two sources say Rubio and Duffy did push back on Musk, accusing him of firing their employees without any consideration for whether letting them go was a good idea.
So we heard Donald Trump say what happened, but a number of people suggest otherwise. Does the level of frustration inside that cabinet, as reported, surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me, but I want to be very clear. I think Donald Trump one day is going to toss Elon Musk to the side, because right now Elon suits his purpose, right? Cut as much as you can from the federal workforce. They don't give a damn about it. And then what he's going to do when it starts dragging down his poll numbers, he's going to say, I didn't do it. It was all Elon Musk. But at the same time, those tensions, I'm not surprised, because remember, Marco Rubio was more of a traditional Republican until he got into that cabinet. This is the guy that also authored legislation to prevent NATO from the president from withdrawing from NATO without a 2/3 vote from the Senate. And then he sat quietly when basically Donald Trump and Elon Musk and all these folks are not only attacking Ukraine, but also questioning our alliance to NATO. So I'm not surprised there's that tension, but don't let it distract. When Elon Musk is done, his purpose is done, and Trump doesn't need him anymore, he's going to get rid of him, and he's going to blame Elon for everything that's been done.
We'll see. The Department of Homeland Security wants to use IRS records to track down 700,000 undocumented immigrants who pay state and federal taxes. And some advocates suggest immigrants may stop paying their taxes. What are you hearing about this from your constituents out there in Los Angeles?
Yeah, there is a real fear on this, and that comes back from the fact that folks at DOJ were trying to get their hands on the Treasury payroll system, payment system, as well as the IRS system. So we knew that they were going to go in this direction because these folks, nothing's off limits, even though giving up tax information is a violation of a section called Section 6103F, and because tax information is so sensitive. But if they can get your an individual's information that they think is undocumented, they can also get yours. And remember, this administration has been butchering and screwing up anything that they've gotten their hands on from these departments. That's why they fired. Don't forget, they fired people that were in charge of making sure our nuclear weapons were secure. They fired people that were meant to track down and investigate the bird flu to combat that. So do we trust them that they're going to actually only focus on undocumented immigrants? No. I have no doubt that they're going to make this even worse. So you're going to not only lose out on tax money, but you're also going to probably violate citizen and legal residents' information and put them at risk and their money at risk.
Yeah. Okay. California Congressman Jimmy Gomez, thank you for your time with us. Appreciate that.
I love days like this. I love news days like this. There's so much to show you. Here's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today. People turned out to stand up for science. That was the name of the protest, to protest against the Trump administration's indiscriminate cuts to science in all ways. You can see some of the signs here. Fight for science, defend the NIH, defunding research is a recession plan. That's actually quite true. Here's a good one. Quote, budget cuts create all kinds of trouble. I had to look that up. Alkynes, A-L-K-Y-N-E-S, alkynes are organic molecules made of the functional group carbon-carbon triple bonds. They are unsaturated hydrocarbons. And budget cuts create all kinds of trouble. Here's another good one in Pittsburgh. Got polio? No? Thanks, science. And you see where it says it's a Berg thing and the Salk vaccine there. The University of Pittsburgh is where Jonas Salk developed the polio vaccine. Across the state of Pennsylvania, outside City Hall in Philadelphia, look at this. This was this is impressive. This was the Stand Up for Science crowd outside Philly City Hall today. That's a big, look at that. That's a really big protest. Some good signs at the Philly protest as well. Your policy, defund the NIH, has been rejected by peer review. This is a good one. I feel like this one is special for Susan's birthday today. She loves Beaker from the Muppets. Susan, this happened in Philly today. This is the only orange Muppet I trust to tell me about science. Me. A version of this sign we saw a few different places today. I love trans mice. All right. I know you didn't listen to Trump's speech to Congress this week. I saw the numbers. It was the least watched Trump State of the Union or joint speech to Congress of all the ones he's given. So I know you didn't watch. But one of the things he said in his speech was that one of the terrible liberal things that his top campaign donor had discovered was happening in government was research to make mice transgender. And he said that in his speech, and all the Republicans gasped and laughed and jeered because that was so terrible. Actually, it's transgenic mice. And transgenic mice are used in all kinds of laboratory research because mice are transgenic when they have been genetically altered so you can study human illnesses and conditions in them even though they're mice. It is transgenic mice, you numbskulls. But sure, go ahead and shut down all the labs studying all the diseases, because what are you, 5? This was Boston. There were big crowds today in Boston as well. Stand up for science. Some signs in Boston. No science means no medicine, no tech, no progress, no future. Also this one, cut DNA, not the NIH. Genetics research and experimentation. Of course, because it's Boston, there's a Dunkin' Donuts sign. America runs on science. In Madison, Wisconsin, local public radio there put the turnout at what they described as more than 1,000 at the Stand Up for Science protest at the Wisconsin State Capitol. Wisconsin Democratic Party Chairman Ben Wickler said he was there and he thought the crowd was even larger than that. He also singled out his favorite sign in Madison, which was, quote, "No science, no cheese." It's Wisconsin. Really, really big crowd turned out in New York City at Washington Square Park to protest against Trump's cuts to science. Look at that. Cold day, cold, windy day today in New York City. 9 out of 10 preventable diseases prefer the GOP. Every disaster movie begins with a politician ignoring science. See the one on the left there? It was a cold, miserable Chicago winter day today in the Windy City, but people turned out in big numbers in Chicago as well to protest. In addition to all the scientists and supporters and regular people who showed up, they also got some high-level representation from their members of Congress, including Senator Dick Durbin and Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. In Atlanta, there were big crowds in Atlanta at Liberty Plaza. Atlanta, of course, is home to the CDC, which Trump has whacked with big cuts and huge numbers of firings. People turned out in the South, in Little Rock, Arkansas, on the state capitol steps. Stand Up for Science. People turned out in Lansing, Michigan, with signs supporting the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We love NOAA. So stop firing the darn meteorologists and the people who run the freaking weather radar. People turned out in St. Louis, Missouri, which is a good science sign. Time to react with the steaming beaker. Raleigh, North Carolina, part of what they love to call the research triangle. But here are researchers and scientists and their supporters and regular folks having to come out in Raleigh, North Carolina today, protesting against Donald Trump's massive cuts to scientific research. The biggest protest today was in Washington, D.C. Literally thousands of people turned out to stand up for science and protest against Trump today. Really big turnout in Washington. Signs there include these. Science is not a liberal conspiracy. Fund science, save lives. DOJ doesn't pass peer review. Also this one, very simply, cancer is not a partisan issue. This is a nice subtle one. Hello, Health and Human Services Secretary. Quote, "Science prevents brain worms." Stand Up for Science protests happened all over the country today. And this was a big national organizing effort that was led by a small cadre of people just directly affected by these cuts. Graduate students and doctoral candidates and young scientists called this march today in Washington, and then soon dozens of satellite marches sprung up all around the country, and you saw the evidence of that there.